Morgan, wonderful. Okay, well, I'm gonna kick things off. So welcome to Holding Steady with Claire Bidwell Smith and Pastor Corey Kennard. You're all in for a big treat today. My name is Dara Cosberg, and I am the program director at Reimagine. And as a nonprofit organization, we spark community experiences like this one that empower individuals, families, and communities to face the hardest parts of our existence, including serious illness and death, while inspiring people to celebrate life and one another. Before I begin the program, I just want to first off offer profound gratitude to our sponsors who support Reimagine and make this work possible. I also want to specifically call out that today's presentation is made possible with support from the National End-of-Life Doula Alliance, an inclusive nonprofit membership organization seeking to inspire positive, creative change in American death practices that lead to meaningful end-of-life experiences for people of all races and diverse backgrounds. And the one last thing I want to mention, here's my cats, Sammy and Biscuit. I am going to update the photo for fun, just so you can see different dimensions of them. But you can turn on and off your microphone with the mute button on the left. You can turn on and off your camera. We invite you to put on your camera if possible to make us all feel a little bit more connected to each other. You can share comments and questions through the chat. If the chat though is distracting to you, in the right-hand corner, you can click that little arrow and close the chat. And if you are on audio, or if you called in on your phone, during the Q&A section, you can unmute yourself by clicking *6. So with that, I would love to introduce Claire Bidwell Smith, an internationally renowned author, speaker, and grief expert. She is the author of 3 books of nonfiction: The Rules of Inheritance, After This, When Life is Over, Where Do We Go? And Anxiety, The Missing Stage of Grief, which actually, Claire, my book just arrived today. So I'm or yesterday, and I'm excited to start it. And her books have been published in 18 countries. And anyways, she's just great. And she's going to introduce the wonderful Pastor Corey Kennard, who has been a big part of the Reimagine family for a long time. And I'm just excited that he gets to be with us today too.
Thank you so much, Dara. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to be with you again this week. These weekly calls have been so meaningful to me, and I hear from others that they have been an important part of just processing this time. When the pandemic happened, this was kind of the first thing I thought to do. I'm a communicator, I'm a connector. I love to come together and process, and I like to have hard conversations because I've been having to have them since I was a kid when my parents both got sick. And so I started these calls and just started bringing people in the end of life space on every week to talk about end of life right now and how we cope with all the grief and the anxiety and the confusion and the kind of facing our mortality and the beauty and the inspiration that's coming during this time. On that note, I am so excited to have Pastor Corey Kennard here with us today. The last time I saw him was in December at Bidwell conference in San Francisco, and he brought down the house with this amazing talk that you should look up and watch if you haven't seen it. And our life has changed so much since that time, Corey. I'm going to read your bio just really quickly, but Corey Kennard is pastor of Amplify Christian Church. He's been involved in the field of healthcare for over 20 years, with over a decade of experience in the areas of palliative care and hospice. In addition to serving as a pastor and healthcare activist, Pastor Corey is a spiritual life coach, motivational speaker, partner board member for several community organizations that seek to uplift the poor and vulnerable in society. As a credit to his work, he has received the Michigan Chronicle's Men of Excellence Award as being one of the top 50 most influential African-American men in the metropolitan Detroit region. So welcome, Corey. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right, it's definitely my pleasure to be here. And hello, everybody that's on. Thank you for taking time out of your day to be here.
So Corey, the last time we saw each other was in December. um, how
Different world.
how's 2020 been for you?
Just like everybody else's 2020, it's been challenging for the most part. As we know, several things have happened since the beginning of this year, and really, I'm calling it now the Roaring '20s for real. This is our version of the Roaring '20s. It has come in with a great roar, and I believe that with COVID-19, the devastation of that. Hitting us really in December, we had no clue that something like this was headed our way. To experience it the way that we have been experiencing it, along with the unrest in America right now due to racial discrimination, things of that nature. There's a lot going on in 2020, but there's also a lot we can learn. So I'm not ready. A lot of people are saying I'm ready for this year to be over with. No, I think there's some lessons that we need to learn now that are going to take us positively into the future. And so this is a transitional year for us, I believe.
I agree. I think as uncomfortable as times like this are, they're so illuminating, and they're so, they lead to, breakdowns that lead to rebuilds, right? We get this opportunity
Right.
to take a really hard look at things in a really uncomfortable and painful way. And it's across the board. I think that it's from micro levels to macro levels that we are having to take a look at everything. I feel like everything is kind of breaking down, but I don't think it's a bad thing. It's uncomfortable and it's scary and it's painful, but I'm optimistic that we can learn so much from it. So I'm with you. I don't feel ready for it to be over. I think we need to keep learning.
And I think we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Mhm.
And really, discomfort is what really causes true change to take place. And so with all of this, with COVID, and like I said, the unrest in this country, it's a great opportunity for us to really move forward positively. So excited to talk about all of this and more.
Yeah. I just want to hear a little of your, how did you begin to learn how to be uncomfortable how did you learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable? I mean, it's not something that comes naturally to us. Most of us come to that place from having to go through some hard experiences. Where was that shift for you in your life?
Wow. That's a great question. I believe it was my call to ministry early on. I really, trust me, being a pastor is something that I never grew up wanting to be. I was like every other kid, being a fireman, policeman, lawyer, doctor, whatever the case may be. But really in my life, when I began to experience people leaving my life, people dying, and people really, I felt had these voids in their lives. And I wanted to be the type of person that said, you know what, how can I help to fill that void? And I've always been involved in church life, so to speak, but I never saw myself leading in the capacity that I'm leading in now. And it was really, a night that I spent really in prayer. I spent, a ton of time in prayer, but this night was really significant. It was different. And I felt like there was something welling up inside of me. And I actually denied it for a period of time. If anyone has heard of the story or knows the account of Jonah, who really ran away and was swallowed up by the great fish, a lot of people understand or know that particular account. That was me. I was running. I didn't want to be involved in ministry. I didn't want to have the responsibility of caring for the lives, the spirits, and the souls of people. So I ran and got kind of swallowed up by several fish in my life of failing at certain things, of really not knowing which direction to go in. And ultimately, when I yielded and became comfortable with being uncomfortable with ministry, that to me started and sparked a new change in my life that I've really never looked back on since. I've just been moving forward. So it was probably, and I was really, and let me say this, I was in my mid-20s when that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So if I can put a time reference to that, it was almost a few decades ago. Almost a few, not quite, but almost.
I feel like once you go over that waterfall of learning how to be uncomfortable, you can never go back, right? You can never kind of go back into that denial of just complacency, right? Like, I think once you really truly go over into it, it's so hard to go into denial again.
It's crossing over. And once you cross over, I mean, and you experience something new, who wants to go back? Who wants to be a part of something that they really have been delivered from? I don't want to go back to that old me, that old self, that way of living that just wanted to get by or accepted being average or complacent. There's a new, this is has been for a while now, a new era in my life. And so I refuse to be average. And I tell people, once you experience not ever wanting to be average again, that's when your greatness kicks in. And whatever you are focused in life, this is the motivational speaker coming out in me now. But I want everybody to know and understand that if you accept being average, you will never experience what I believe your God-given gifts are. And until you become comfortable in being uncomfortable, I don't think you can move into that realm of really impacting and affecting the lives of others. So for me, we just have to be a risk taker. And this is a risk. All of this is a risk. It's a risk that, America's at a crossroads. And this is a great risk for people. I was just talking to someone today, and they indicated that they were having a conversation about the unrest. And he's white, and he was actually having a conversation with some of his friends about the unrest in America. And some of those friends were like, I don't want to talk about that. I'm done. And if you want to talk about that, I don't know if I want to talk to you anymore. So this is kind of where we are right now in this country. And even with COVID, we have to change our lifestyle. So we have to change. I mean, wearing a mask in public. I'm in Detroit. For those of you who don't know where I am, I'm in Detroit, Michigan, which was a hotbed and is a hotbed for COVID-19. Many deaths have occurred in this area, and we have adapted to wearing masks now outside everywhere we go, and it's difficult. It's different. It's strange. But when you saw, or if you saw the amount of death that I saw during the peak time of March and April and the beginning of May. The amount of deaths that were occurring due to COVID-19 and COVID-19 contributing to deaths, trust me, wearing a mask is nothing. You want to protect not only yourself, but you want to protect others. And whatever the theories are about masks and things of that nature, whatever you can do to protect yourself from just really this horrific disease, do it, and just be okay with being uncomfortable for a time being until we can all get through this.
Yeah. And when we're wearing masks, we're not even just protecting ourselves, but we're protecting other people, right? It's a social responsibility, I think, on one level.
Yeah, it's more of that, as a matter of fact, of protecting others than even protecting ourselves.
Yeah. Let's talk about the last couple of weeks since George Floyd's death. What has it been like for you personally? And then what has it been like for you professionally? I'd like to hear both experiences.
I'll start with the professional side. What I've experienced, I work for a major healthcare organization. I'm in administration, and here in Detroit, one of the largest hospitals here in Southeast Michigan. And professionally, what it has done is it has been a great eye-opener for me. It has helped me to see that there are many people in healthcare that wanted to talk about the disparities, healthcare disparities with African Americans. They wanted to have these conversations, and George Floyd's horrific death has put us in a position to not avoid those conversations anymore. And we're having very productive conversations. Those who are at the very top of our leadership are now asking, for my advice and questions about what can we do to make things better. And so for me professionally, things have truly turned the corner. And we're talking about a subject matter that I'm proud to be able to talk about now. I've been stomping the ground about this stuff for years. Back in, I worked with Dr. Richard Payne, God rest his soul, great friend of some of you who may be on this call now, who passed away. in 2019, in January of 2019. And he was really my mentor in healthcare. And, so my affiliation with Duke University and being able to travel the country and talk about healthcare disparities is something that we've done for years. And so to now see things change professionally and people wanting to talk about these things, it's been great for me to see. Personally, it has really exposed to others the life that I've had to live, even being a professional, a healthcare professional. I don't always dress like this. I don't always have a bow tie or a suit on. I'm the type of guy that will have a baseball cap, t-shirt, blue jeans, and Air Jordans, and I'm walking around. I can see the looks that I get sometimes from individuals who are not African American, and I've dealt with the authority abuse of police officers. I've been discriminated against, been called those horrific terms that are sometimes put towards African Americans, and so it's hurtful. But it's something that you learn to live with here in America, unfortunately. And so it doesn't matter, I have, a couple degrees, but it doesn't matter. To me, at the end of the day, many times I'm still just considered to be a Black man in America. And, I try to make sure that people understand that, sometimes personally, it becomes a great weight. It becomes stressful. And I think that for many African Americans, that stress has led to many of the healthcare ills or health ills that are experienced in the African American community that may not be experienced in other communities in the same way. And so personally, it's been a weight. I've had to, as a father, talk to my children about these things, sit down and watch these videos, and the countless other times where videos have not been captured, that have been documented, things that have happened. It's just tough. And so I saw myself being in George Floyd's position. I saw my son being in that position. And so to have that, that idea that could easily happen to me if I make the wrong move, if I do the wrong thing, it's stressful to live that way. And hopefully we, as all Americans, can work towards a more unified front where we can get past those feelings and concerns.
Thank you. Do you think there's anything different about this time, this death, this unrest, this movement? Do you think anything different is happening or different will change?
I do. And I'm hearing it from people who were around in the 60s marching, people who were fighting for civil rights in this country and human rights in this country who are African American. And what I'm seeing right now is that society, and this is not just an African American thing, society has generated a generation that don't see through the same type of lens in life that some of us who are 50 years or 60 years and older have been made to look through in life. They see people, they and we all see color. Let's not fool ourselves. I hate when people say I don't see color. No, we see color. We just don't want to act upon what we see in a shallow way, in a shallow sense, because of someone's different ethnicity or color or background. So we see color. Let's just be honest, and let's start there. But also, this generation, they see color, but they embrace the differences. They embrace the different lifestyles that people have, and that's what I'm really celebrating now. And if you go to my Instagram page, and this is not a plug for my Instagram page, but it's I am Pastor Corey. That's all it is. I am Pastor Corey. And so on that Instagram page, I've tried to put posts there that to me have signified what this movement is and how it's different. I have white young men and white young women who have been at rallies that I've gone to, and I've just taken pictures. And is it all right if I post this? And they say, yeah, sure. But when you see places like Seattle, and when you see places like, Norway and Germany, and people marching and talking about rights and Black Lives Matter, which, 4 years ago, 6 years ago, was a no-no to even say, and people rejected it. Now you're seeing people embrace it. It's just something that is different about this. And I would say that difference is divine. And the reason why I say it's divine is because I believe that every era in history, there's been what Malcolm Gladwell calls the tipping point. And I believe we are at the tipping point right now of moving from the way things have been, the discrimination, the injustices that have happened to whether you're black, white, rich, poor, all of those things, gender differences, sexual orientations, all these injustices that have happened because of who people are or how they look. This generation is saying this is the wrong generation to try to promote that stuff with. And so I really believe it's different. And the biggest difference of all just came recently when NASCAR decided to eliminate the Confederate flag from being promoted at their particular races. That is huge. People don't, you may not understand, you may not, I don't even watch NASCAR really, but to be in a position to see something like that, to see something that's very hurtful to someone who looks like me from our past, to know that those things are being removed so that we can move forward. To me, that's huge. And so Claire, those things that I mentioned and many others have proved to me that this is something that's different. And I hate the fact that George Floyd had to die in the way that he did for us to see this. Many of us who've been fighting for years, but to see my white brothers and sisters really stand firm, toe to toe, shoulder to shoulder with black brothers and sisters and, Latinx brothers and sisters, or Latinx, I'm sorry. I want to make sure I use that term correctly, that denotes both genders. I want to make sure that people understand that the more we stand together in unity on the right side of history, we're going to see change. And that's what makes us different.
Yeah, I agree. I'm optimistic that there is something different this time. And I'm heartened to hear that, it's coming into places like your hospital healthcare system, like you're being asked questions, you're sitting down to have these conversations. I think that COVID was already illuminating racial disparities in healthcare and what was going on in this country. And then this kind of maybe is the tipping point to actually change that, so that you guys are having those conversations in hospitals and medical settings and starting to really make some changes. Is that feels different. That feels very significant, along with all the other things that you've been talking about. Tell me about racial disparity at end of life. You and I have both worked in hospice, you're in palliative care as well for a long time. And I think there's a lot of issues in that arena around racial disparity. And what have you seen, and what do you think needs to change in that arena?
A couple things. One is, I believe the illnesses that African Americans have been saddled with that have led to palliative care and ultimately hospice care. Something that's very difficult for people of color or African Americans to embrace. It's hard to embrace a service that, or a health, what I call health ministry, that you never thought you would actually be confronted with for many people who are dying much earlier than expected. And so hospice services are a hard sell, so to speak, to many African Americans, because death has become so much a part of life that, we try to find many ways to avoid dealing with that subject matter of death. And so many of the disparities that have caused illnesses that have led to death much faster than people expected is one obstacle that hospice has as it relates to delivering that beautiful, wonderful service of hospice care. And then also, when you look at, people have not been able to really differentiate between palliative care and hospice care. So, when you come with this term palliative care, which, most people don't even know how to spell, let alone, try to be a part of, receiving that service. I think that we need to be more cognizant of our terminology in terms of how we use it. And then also we need to be more with palliative care and hospice care, be more upstream. And what do I mean by upstream? I believe that, and I did a consult with a hospice company not too long ago, and they were asking me, how can we reach people in the African-American community? And I say, stop showing up at the doorstep of death.
Mm-hmm.
You got to show up earlier. And what does that mean? There are organizations, there are things that are happening in the community that you need to be a part of before someone gets sick, before they get to the point of death. So you want to be a part of, I say, sponsor a little league baseball team or flag football team. Put the name of your organization out there so that people will know that you're not just there to usher them to death. Because when you look at hospice, when you look at palliative care, it's looked at as being a part of the healthcare system. And when you look at the healthcare system, it's looked at as being a part of the system in society as a whole. And so if I'm well, and if I'm doing well, and something like the instance with George Floyd can happen to me when I'm, pretty healthy and doing pretty well for myself. And if I see that this is how you think of my life as being while I'm healthy, then guess what? When I'm sick and vulnerable, I'm really going to question whether or not you care about me.
Yeah, the level of trust there has got to be enormous.
Right. So there's not, that trust is not there. And you get people who are now, saying, well, you didn't care about me when I was healthy. Why should I trust my life or put my life in your hands or my care in your hands when I'm sick? And so many, that's why many African Americans don't, and historically don't go to the doctor, don't go to healthcare. Then when we do, it's constantly questioning whether or not I'm receiving the same type of treatment that maybe my white brother and sister in the next room is receiving. And especially if I'm on a ventilator, are you trying every measure you can to make sure that you are seeking to preserve my life, as opposed to, just removing me and getting rid of me so that you can move on to the next patient? So those are the questions and the thoughts that really swirl in the minds of African Americans, and it makes it harder for great services like palliative care and hospice care to come in and really be a part of a family's life during that tough time. So moving more upstream, being more educational as it relates to the community, going to churches, going to organizations that are meeting and saying, we just want to talk to you about this wonderful service that we have, and not waiting until someone's on their deathbed to present them with this service where they feel like they have no choice and no authority to even say no.
Right. Yeah, I mean, people don't want to talk about death and dying and get advanced planning in order generally when they're healthy, So I can imagine that the added level that the racial disparity and racism brings to it is enormous. I feel like it has to start also even earlier in the education and teaching system in medical universities, and like the racism that's going on in textbooks and in classrooms and in just teaching protocols, and how we work with patients has got to change too on like just a massive level.
Yeah, I mean, the reason you have the National Medical Association is because the American Medical Association would not let African Americans join. So you have, all of these things that have divided us because of racist thoughts that have been throughout, history. And there's a great resource that I tell people, it's a book that I believe everybody that's involved in medicine needs to read if we really want to deal with how we think about, people in healthcare and African Americans in particular. It's called Medical Apartheid. And Medical Apartheid, Harriet Washington wrote this book. Many people know about the Tuskegee experiment, but Tuskegee is such a small, minute, and I'm not trying to minimize it, but on a scale of everything that has happened, Tuskegee is very small and minute. So there's a huge picture of historical medical racism that has happened, where literally it didn't even stop when a person died. There were graves that were dug up for African-American bodies to be looked at and experimented on, and to try different things or to extract certain things without families even knowing, and finding out later. So we have a horrific history that once we can uncover those things and talk about those things, that's when I think the change actually, will begin to occur in healthcare. But we have to have a meaningful conversation. It doesn't mean that we're going to agree on everything, but can we love each other through the disagreements?
And that's what I think is really important about this particular moment in time. I think that there is opportunity to start really having those conversations. I haven't seen people as willing to start having these conversations as they seem to be right now. And that gives me some hope, because it's about a lot of hard conversations in order to start making these changes. I would love for you guys to start putting in any questions, comments you want to address, you want Pastor Corey to answer for you. We're going to keep chatting for a minute, but anything you want to bring up that you would love for us to talk about, or just directly ask Pastor Corey, that would be great. What kinds of things are you being asked about on an administrative level that can be changes that we can start making right now?
I'm being asked about, really, and this is coming from, you hear me say this term, white brothers and sisters, because I need us to see each other as brothers and sisters. The main question is, what can I do? I've gotten text messages, emails, people that were surprised that, I had to talk with my son, who is now 18 years old, when he began to drive, give him instructions on not just how to drive, but if stopped by the police, what to do. How to act. We put the registration in a certain spot in the car for him and my daughters as well, so that they don't have to reach into a place that is, undisclosed, where, the officer may not know what they're going for. Those are things that we have to be concerned about. So to make slow movements, to keep your hands at 10 and 2, not just to drive, but even when you're stopped, 10 and 2. That's what we have to teach. And many people became very disturbed and upset about the fact that I even have to talk about those things to my family members, to my children. And my wife and I, these are things that we have to do. It's the life that we live. Now, I'm not saying that to paint this picture of victimization. What I'm saying is that my reality may not be the same as yours. And the more you understand my reality and understand me, and the more I understand you and your reality, the better that we can have, these types of conversations and be in a position where we can work through some of the things that are, keeping us divided unnecessarily. But also, how can we get better in our hiring practices? How can we get better in promoting and giving everyone an opportunity to be promoted in certain positions? To be honest, I'm as a Black man, I'm in the minority as it relates to being in leadership and healthcare. It's just not there. Many times I'm the only African American in a meeting or in a room, and any question that comes up about African American lifestyle and things of that nature, or patients, guess who gets looked at? Guess who's expected to have the answers? And that's a heavy weight to carry, so to speak. And unbeknownst to most people, all Black people are not alike. We don't all think alike. I want to say that I cannot be the spokesperson for the entire African American group that's here in America or even in the world. So understand that we all have different walks, even though we may look the same. I may have, if you live in my community, I may have more in common with you, Claire, than with someone else who may be African American. Those things are, and even biologically, it has been proven. And my friend, Dr. Richard Payne, God rest his soul, was thumping the ground about this constantly, that my DNA is probably, Claire, more closely related to you than it is with another African-American woman. So, with me and another African-American woman. And so these things have been proven. So race is something that I think that we need, it's a term that's been made up, so to speak, that has helped to keep us divided. But also, if we see each other as human beings with differences, exterior and internally, I think that we can learn more about each other, be curious about who we are, and be curious about the things that are happening. And I'm finding more curiosity coming my way now about my life as a Black man in America and in healthcare, and the things that I think about and how others can help me to feel more comfortable sometimes, and most of the times, being in the minority.
I think curiosity is such an important piece of this, just being curious, asking people about their experiences and what their lives are like and what their day-to-day is like, what their children's lives are like, what they think about in the middle of the night, just being curious. All of my white friends are what can we do? What can we do? What can we do? And then all my Black friends are stressed out because all their white friends are asking them what can they do? And they're tired of trying to answer these questions. But I think curiosity is such an amazing part of it,
And Claire, can I just interject this too as well? I want to say that COVID-19, the order of this is really significant as well. COVID-19 revealed and unveiled some things in this area that may not be the same someplace else. And I think that the conversations that I'm having here are a little bit easier to have, seeing the devastation that we saw in the African-American community. So it has brought to the forefront the healthcare disparities that are present in the African-American community, because we saw that COVID-19 was feeding off of heart disease. It was feeding off of those who are diabetic. It was feeding off of those who had asthma. It was feeding off of those, and many of those statistics show that African Americans are hit harder, especially in this area, than any other group, racial group. And so African Americans were dying at an alarming rate due to COVID-19. So COVID-19 exposed some things that I think are helping this conversation to move forward in the arena of healthcare. And just to give you a picture, we had in this county alone, we had an 11.5% death rate at the peak of this, 11.5%. Our death rate in the hospital went up. It was 200% greater than its normal rate here in the hospital. We were dealing with 25 deaths a week here in this hospital, and we were hitting 76, almost 80 people dying in 1 week here in this hospital. So trust me, this conversation is one that has been forced to happen as well due to the pandemic that we are experiencing.
Yeah. I'm going to ask some questions here from the chat. Sheila says, following up on what you both said about health disparities, what do you think needs to happen in order for health disparities to end in medical or end-of-life spaces? Because racism runs so deep and is often unconscious, and people often really resist inspecting and owning their biases, it's not going to be fundamentally changed by just offering a cultural competency continuing education workshop for staff.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think we're going to have to start here. And here's where I think we should start with just looking at the overall health of African Americans and why many African Americans are in an unhealthy state. It starts with, here in the city of Detroit, there's not one major grocery store food chain in the city of Detroit. Not one major grocery. We don't have Kroger. We don't have any in the inside of the city limits. So what does that say? That means people have to catch the bus to get certain, foods and decent food. Some of the smaller chain grocery stores don't carry some of the fresh produce that some of those major chains carry. We have Whole Foods in the city of Detroit. We do. However, Whole Foods is not affordable to many people. Trust me, I buy from there, and I don't buy there often because it's not affordable for everybody, right?
Well, a paycheck for a reason.
Right, exactly. So you get people buying groceries from Rite Aid and CVS, if many of you are familiar with those types of places, and they're going in, and we know the high salt content, and things of that nature. If things are not fresh, where do you get fruit from? So those are the things. So you get canned fruit, which it's not the best for you, but this is the diet that people have day in and day out. So we need advocates who can say, we need to have fresh produce more accessible for people in the African American community, because years and years of eating that type of diet is leading to the poor health, which leads to healthcare disparities, which leads to COVID-19 feeding off of those things. So COVID-19 is killing African Americans at a higher rate because of the things that have preceded COVID-19 ever existing in our society. So we need advocates who say, who can help to educate more African Americans even about, how to eat and how to cook better and things that can be done. And I've put programs in place. I've talked with chefs. I've talked with people, but the problem is access to that on a daily basis, not one time or twice, but how can we make that a part of the lifestyle of many African Americans? So it starts there, I think.
Absolutely. I'm going to get to a couple other questions, but just to piggyback on that, Michelle says, why aren't there food chains in the city?
You know, and so I've gotten the feedback after being a part of an organization that has even talked with, you know, these owners, is that they're saying that the profit margin wasn't as great as they thought it would be within the inner city. And they also talked about theft. So they talked about those two things as reasons for leaving the community. And that's something that I have an issue with. If we're talking about the health of individuals, if your profit margins are not what you think they should be, ultimately, if you look at society, poor health in the African American community is causing more economic devastation than losing, you know, just a few dollars in your profit margin as a food chain.
Yeah. Zoe has a great question. Can you talk about the emotional experience of loss and grief amidst the pandemic combined with the realities of the uprising? I'm watching this situation as a Black woman in the UK, but really want to hear what this complexity feels like for you and the community you serve.
Wow. I think that, you know, we have been living with grief and the devastation of death for many years, where you know, it's not uncommon to see it. The way that it has happened with George Floyd and others, Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, and many of the recent names along going back to Eric Garner and historically, you know, Emmett Till, and just years and years of this has almost created truly a numbness to some of the death that we see. And that's a very dangerous place to be. You know, and that's why I'm a little concerned about seeing these videos over and over and over again. I don't want people to become numb to the pain and the grief that is felt by these families when this devastation happens. And so I try to, as I look at what's happening and with the unrest, I think that what has happened is more people have become involved in feeling this pain and this hurt. And I think it was one of the most horrific displays in history to see what I call a lynching of George Floyd right there in front of everybody on the street for everybody to see. I feel like that's something that has moved into the hearts of humans all over the world. And I feel that devastation has helped us to open our hearts to the fact that we have a specific group in the community who's hurting and who's in pain. And I feel that devastation for my brother and my sister, and I want to do what I can to help. I don't know if I answered that question. I kind of just started talking there, but hopefully I hit on some points that could help. And if I missed something, Claire, please let me know what I missed.
Zoe, do you want to come on and expand on it at all? You can unmute yourself. I think it's, go for it.
In the background. Yeah, no, I mean, you explained it very well, and it's different. I'm not in the country. I'm watching it on TV screens, but the situation here is there are similarities, and it's just, yeah, the layers. There seems to be layers upon layers, and I was just curious for you as a pastor, as someone in theory who can make sense, just like what your approach to unraveling the grief, yet trying to remain active and hopeful. It's just, yeah, so complex.
Yeah, and it's a difficult place to be in as a pastor as well, because you want to give people hope, right? I mean, that's my job. I'm a hope dealer, not a dope dealer, a hope dealer. And so I try to help people to have hope. But it's so hard when you see things like this. And I think the role of religious leaders and faith leaders is such that we have to give people hope by standing with people who are hurting and letting them know they're not hurting alone. And we're going to do all that we can as faith leaders to keep something like this from happening again. So I think that's the hope that we have right now. And that's the hope that I want to give, is that I don't know why this is happening the way that it is, but because it's happening, I want to let you know we're not in this alone. You're not going to have to go through this alone as a family, and we're going to do all that we can to keep this from happening again. That's the hope that I want to give people.
Thank you. Thanks, Zoe. Corey, how do we honor our individual feelings of grief, and like for George Floyd himself, for all the others, for the kind of massive systemic problems, like how do we kind of tap into and honor that grief that we all feel throughout this time?
Be honest. Be honest with how you feel. If you don't feel anything, ask yourself why. If you feel great hurt and pain, ask yourself why. Look at your life and see those situations that may be a layer of grief that this is, built upon, that this is building upon, so to speak, I want to say. Just look at your life overall and say, why do I feel the way that I feel? And then own how you feel. I cried. I wanted people to know that I cried. I wanted people to know that I hurt, that hurt me to see that, because I saw myself. And so with that, I have to begin to process why I feel the way that I do, and ultimately use that grief, that hurt, and that pain to propel me to do whatever I can to keep that from happening again, without taking on the characteristics of violence and not taking on the characteristics of the things that that hurt me as a person watching that. I want to say, how can we do better at this? How can we pass legislation? How can we work with individuals, put the right people in office who care about humanity, not just about one group or another group, but about human beings in general? How can we, have our voices heard through our voting process? How can we deal with real issues and say and hold our politicians accountable and say, we put you in office. Now, here's some things that we really want to talk about that you're not addressing. And if you don't address them, we may have to find somebody else to address these issues. So all I'm saying is that we must own our grief and then begin the process of working through asking ourselves the question of, why do I feel this way? And then work through the fact of why we don't want to feel that way anymore, and what can we do to change that feeling or that hurt. But grief is as you know, Claire, I mean, and you're so eloquent in dealing with grief. Grief is an ongoing process. It's something that we will never rid ourselves of, but it's how we carry it that really becomes the determining factor of how change is going to come.
I agree. I've had some conflicting thoughts about anger and sadness during this time, especially the last couple of weeks. As a grief therapist, I feel like anger always has its place, yet when you peel up the lid of anger, underneath you almost only ever find fear and sadness. Those two things are always kind of underneath the lid of anger. But I've had so many people say, I keep hearing that, they're tired of being sad. They don't want to be sad anymore. Well, they want to be angry and active, and it's time to be angry and active. And I agree, but I feel like it's important to let ourselves feel that sadness too. I don't want to let one go for the other. Does that make sense? This is just a totally personal thing that I've been thinking about a lot.
No, it makes a lot of sense. Fannie Lou Hamer, a great activist in the African-American community, she said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I think that's kind of, where we are right now. We're sick and tired of being sick and tired. So what else can I do? I've hurt, I've been sad, but then there's also this anger, like you said, that comes forth, and I want to do something. I want this action to take place. Something has got to change. And so I think that's also a healthy thing to embrace as well. How can I use that anger? There's a spiritual passage that says, be angry, but sin not. So what does that mean? That means that, it's okay to have anger. There's some things that we should be angry about. The George Floyd situation, we should be angry about that. Discrimination, we should be angry about that. Injustice, we should be angry about those things. So when we have what I call a righteous anger, we can begin to process it better by owning it and asking ourselves once again, why am I angry? Why am I so angry? And then how can I use this anger to propel me positively to make a difference? But I hear your conflict, Claire. I think it's a great place for you to be, because it's going to just really ultimately bring about more questions that I think you'll ultimately have answers to as you continue down that road of curiosity, so to speak, and dealing with that conflict of sadness and anger, which ultimately, as you said so eloquently, at the root of it is fear. I believe that there's a fear there. And that fear factor says to me, the reason why I'm angry is because I don't want to ever be in that position. And I'm afraid to be in that position.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid for my family to see my name as one of the names that's called out, that as, you know, ultimately my life has been snuffed out due to violence. You know, I don't want my name to be there. So I'm fearful of that, but I'm angry because I know that it can be me. And so I need to do all I can to fight against that becoming me, or my son, or my daughters, or my wife, or my family members, or anybody that's listening on, you know, to this webinar right now.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of it. I want people to be conscious and curious about all the dimensions within anger that are underneath it and around it, and, you know, fuel it, because there's so much more than just this kind of exterior anger, which is so real and so valid, but there's kind of, it's like an iceberg. There's a whole bunch underneath, you know, that you're not seeing too. And I think finding ways to get our hands around all of it, to acknowledge all of it, to sit with it, is really important. If we're just doing one, I'm not sure that's the answer, if that makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense.
I think so much is driven by fear. You know, we know this, everyone knows this. I mean, we talk about fear all the time in so many different realms, and spiritual realms, and racial disparity, and all kinds of things. But I think that's one of the things people are most afraid to sit with, is just facing their fears, their pure unadulterated fear, that they have fear, what it is, what it's about, where it's coming from. And we mask it a lot with other things.
I don't know where I saw this before. It's like a cartoon, and there's this angry man, and he's just angry, and he's like growling almost, and then you see inside of him there's this like little scared child.
Yeah.
And so yes, ultimately that's that masking of, you know, I don't want to appear to be vulnerable. I don't want to appear to be scared. I don't want to appear to be fearful. So it's going to come out in what we call a 180-degree opposite of what I'm feeling. So in order for me to mask it, I got to be this masculine, tough person, because that's what I want people to see, because I don't want them to see that vulnerable child, that vulnerable side of me that may not be as strong as I'm coming off to be. Or, you know, you could be a person that in instances where I've dealt with young people who have been angry and upset, it's because there's this little child that's saying, I wish I had my father. I wish I had my mother in my life. I wish I had somebody that cared about me. I wish I didn't get pregnant at an early age and had this child, but now I'm fearful because I don't know how to raise this child, and things like that. So you see and you hear all these things, and ultimately at the root of it, I believe, and I keep seeing an image of that fearful, scared child that society didn't give a chance to. And we can do something to change that.
Yeah. Thank you, Corey. Janet is asking, what is the best way to handle not being able to have funerals and honor those that have died and are dying now?
What was the first part of that?
What's the best way to handle not being able to have funerals and honor those who have died and are dying right now?
So I had an aunt who died from COVID-19, and it was very hard because I had to watch her funeral on Facebook Live, and because she was in another state as well. But even if I was there, we had a few family members who were able to go. It's a very tough time for people now because they're not able to have that closure. They're not able to participate in what we call a homegoing service of that particular individual. And so there's some anger, Claire, that we're going to see come from this. There's going to be some acting out, so to speak, from being able to have that closure. I was talking to a gentleman whose mom passed away here in this hospital, and I could just sense the anger and that he couldn't have that service, that funeral or he had to watch it on a screen. How insensitive is that? it's not something that we're used to as human beings. We're used to honoring those, being there present with them, with their, their bodies that remain. We are used to participating in that process, and we're not able to. So we have to find ways by writing them letters, maybe. And that's what I want to say, writing a letter to that loved one that passed away. When you're not able to have that funeral for them, sending them that letter, actually mailing it, and then, mailing it to even your own address, and it coming back to you, and then never opening again, and sort of maybe having a ceremony where you're actually burying that particular letter that you wrote to them, expressing your love and your grief and your pain for losing them. And then also family gatherings, as much as possible in this era of COVID-19, as much as possible, people need to get together. We need to check on those individuals who are now living alone, who had a loved one who passed away and weren't able to have a service for them. We just need to be more human and really put our arms around those who are hurting and going through pain. But not to have that service and that funeral is absolutely devastating for people. And so we're going to need counseling services, and we're going to need really, truly love to really embrace those individuals who weren't able to have those services. Other than that, I really don't have an answer. It's tough. It's hard. I've experienced it myself. So I know it's tough and it's hard. And I just don't know any other way of dealing with it right now. I don't know if anyone else has, a suggestion or thought.
I know it's a very real thing going on right now. I've been talking a lot about it. I'm currently leading a COVID support group for women who lost their moms to COVID-19, and the stories that I've been hearing about those losses, about how they couldn't be there with them, some of them having to see them in the funeral home via FaceTime and their bodies and things like that. I mean, it has been a lot. I think one of the things I've been recommending is really kind of using this time as a time to go inward, explore our own spiritualities, explore our religion, explore our, spiritual psychic connections to each other and ourselves, meditation, prayer, finding your own sense of ritual, I think is really important. It's something we don't do well enough in this culture as it is, but now being stripped of it, not having funerals and ceremonies as we usually do, but like cultivating that in ourselves. I think this is a really amazing time to do that. So that's one thing I've been recommending. But thank you so much, Corey. This has been I could talk to you for hours. What's that?
Is our time up already? I mean,
it's already up. I could talk to you for hours. We might have to do this again, like tomorrow.
Yeah, there you go. Definitely, I'm with it. So, but I want to thank you for having me on this particular webinar, Claire, and Reimagine. My friends at Reimagine, I appreciate all of you. I appreciate you listening. Everybody that's here, that's online. I see my good friend Elizabeth there as well. Hey, how you doing? And just a quick story, if I could just say this, she came here to Detroit and she visited me here in the hospital, and what Reimagine has done, it has begun to forge relationships, all over. And so I just thank, God for the ability to have these great relationships and partnerships happen. And so I pray that we can continue things like this into the future. This is what America should look like. This is what the world should look like. People just coming together, regardless of how we look on the exterior, knowing that we have one goal and one purpose, and that's to see humanity live the best life possible.
Oh, I'm going to cry. Thank you so much, Corey. Thank you for all the work you do. And where can we find you, and what are you up to that we can check out upcoming?
Well, you can go to CoreyLKennard.com. That's my website, CoreyLKennard.com. And you can also go to my Instagram site. I am Pastor Corey. My Facebook site at Corey L. Kennard. And you can find me. You can email me at consult, CONSULTCLK @gmail.com as well. There's a number of ways. I'm sure that Dara and everybody else can find a way for you to get that information about me. But just know this, that I'm always open to just hearing questions. Email me, let's talk, let's converse, but let's keep the conversations like this going. And ultimately, we're going to see a better world. Let's not lose this divine moment, y'all. Don't let the momentum slow down. Let's continue to live our best lives possible. And we cannot do that being divided.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dara, for organizing everything. Thank you, Corey. Next week, you guys, I'm going to have Dr. Karen Louise joining us to talk about father loss as we lead up to Father's Day. I know that Father's Day can be a hard time for people who've lost a father. She's the author of the book Fatherless Daughters, and we're going to be talking about father loss around Father's Day. So if any of you know anyone who needs some support with that, or you want to tune in, we would love to have you. Thank you again, Corey. Thanks, Dara.
Yeah. Thank you. And I just put the link in for that event, as well as our upcoming Dose of Togethernesses with David Kessler of grief.com, and also a special dose next Friday with our Director of Development, Stephanie Rivers, and her friend, Latoya, who is going to be speaking about death and dying in the Black community. I also just wanted to call out, thank you, Karen, for bringing this up, that Reimagine just published a virtual memorial guide in partnership with Quarantine. And so I would take a look at that. I think it's a really great resource to organize something virtually. And as we see that it is actually possible in a virtual platform to feel connection, as you guys did so well today. So yes, a huge thank you to Pastor Corey and Claire and all of you for joining us today. And
also, when you call me or when you email me, I want you to give me some feedback. There's a book that I wrote in 2018, Hamburgers and a Holy Man. It's a very interesting read, Hamburgers and a Holy Man. That comes from a vegan. I'm a vegan, but Hamburgers and a Holy Man. And check it out. Let me know what you think. Definitely, but it talks about really human relationships and having dialogues. And so I'm working on the second piece, the sequel to that now. But definitely check it out. Let me know what you think as well.
Awesome.
All right.
Great.
great.
You,
Yes,
Corey.
and we'll include all those links
Yeah.
in the follow-up email. So yeah, great.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. From the bottom of my heart to yours. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.